Yes guys, welcome back to the channel. So today, I'm going to be going over getting lean and staying lean. There's so many of these bodybuilders on social media, people telling you that you need to bulk up, gain a load of weight, gain a load of body fat in order to make good progress. But realistically, everyone wants that physique that I would like to say that I have, lean, good amount of muscle mass, fit, relatively strong. And that's the way that I've lived for the last few years. I've trained for 15 years and I've maintained this look. So I'm going to be telling you how you can achieve that, because I think there's a bit of misinformation out there at the moment. But if you're new to the channel, my name is Joe. I run an online coaching company called Athletic Aesthetic. We generally work with professional men aged 30 to 45. And usually the goal of these men is to lean down and build muscle and maintain that fit, healthy, athletic looking physique year round. So I think when people talk about that look and they obsess over achieving that physique, everyone obviously always thinks about training and nutrition, which is totally right. And we're going to get onto that, but mindset comes first. So I'm going to cover two things here. So first of all, identity, and then the all or nothing mindset. Identity. So it sounds a little bit woo-woo, a little bit cliche, but if you're thinking of yourself and you want to become, someone who is walking around at 12% body fat year round, I would say that athletic look really comes in at between probably 10 to 13% body fat. You have to identify as that person before you're there. A lot of men will come on board with us. They might weigh 190, 195 pounds. And realistically, to help them achieve that look, they need to be getting low 170s, maybe even into the 160s in some cases. So in some cases, there is a lot of weight to lose, but you have to start walking and talking like that person. So, think of just micro decisions that you make on a daily basis. Would the guy walking around with abs at 12% body fat, would he skip his session? Would he say, I'll leave it till the weekend and not do it? Would he overeat every time he eats out? Would he not do his step count each day? And that's the way that I think. I've done this and maintained that look for years, but for me now, it's about my business. If I'm wanting to grow my business to a certain revenue number, I think, would the person who's there act the way that I am? Am I acting like them? So identity is really, really important before you even start a program or anything like that. And the all or nothing mindset is something that I see and hear a lot with high performers that I work with. I literally had a conversation with a woman that I am working with at the moment. We generally work with men, but I do have a few female clients too. She said, if one thing in my routine falls off, then everything else falls down. And I said to her, you've got to get rid of that all or nothing mindset, because usually these people in these jobs are driven by data, these sort of data-driven decisions. They want everything to be perfect. But, if you have a bad workout one day, or maybe you accidentally consume too many calories, that doesn't mean that you failed that week. That doesn't mean that you've even failed that day. So you've got to get rid of that all or nothing mindset, because there's going to be challenges that come up with everything, with travel, with family life, with work, with business. So identify as that person, even 20 pounds before you're there, and get rid of the all or nothing mindset. Because even as me, someone who's been in shape for well over a decade and someone who teaches other people how to do it, I'm not perfect all the time. So that's mindset first. Next, we've got training. Obviously a massively important part of it. If you're looking to achieve that look, that kind of muscular athletic physique, and also stay lean, training is going to be a huge part of that. Obviously, that's why you always hear people say, I want to be a good runner, but I don't want to look like a runner. Strength training is incredibly important. So that's where we're going to start 3 to 4 times a week. Obviously you can strength train 5 times a week, but I just find that the people that I usually work with and my team works with, they're really, really busy. They travel a lot. If we put them on a 5-day strength training split program, they're going to probably end up missing some of those sessions. So 3 to 4 times a week, no need to do any more strength training than that. I've got separate videos on strength training and how to build a proper strength training program. You can go and watch that. But within the strength training, you want to make sure that you are targeting each major muscle group twice a week to maximize strength gains and maximize hypertrophy gains. So chest, back, shoulders, arms, lower body and abs twice a week. And you can achieve that across a 3-day split. So it would be upper body, lower body, full body, or a 4-day split. I'm a big fan of upper body, lower body, push on posterior, a little bit more volume there. But I would say if you are a time deprived individual, just opt for 3 days in the gym per week. That's what I do. I usually train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I always look forward to my strength training sessions. I don't feel like I'm overdoing it, and I can bring the intensity to those sessions. And we're seeing a really good movement, or we have seen a really good movement in the industry over, I would say, probably the last 3 years towards this kind of like more of a focus on health and hybrid training. So even if someone comes to us, they're usually more aesthetic physique focused, but they almost always want to do a little bit of cardio too, because obviously they understand the cardiovascular benefits, the health benefits, and they also like doing cardio as well because it puts them in a good mood. So usually people want to do cardio, I would say 1 to 3 times a week. So, if you're strength training 4 times a week and you want to do 2 cardio sessions, before you know it, you're training almost every day, which isn't sustainable for most people. So leave space for cardio as well when you think about that when you're building your strength training program. Cardio 1 to 3 times a week. You do not have to do cardio to get lean, but you have to understand that if you're not moving as much, if you're not as active as someone else, if you're not doing cardio and you're not as active, you're going to need to consume less calories to get to the same point as them. So I am a fan, when we work with clients, of understanding how much they can and are willing to move throughout the week from a step standpoint, which we'll get onto in a second, and also a cardio standpoint, and then we'll build the program off that. I would say a great sweet spot would be 3 strength training sessions, 2 cardio sessions a week. You're burning a good amount of calories throughout the week, and you can lean down on a higher amount of calories too. Cardio, again, I am a big fan of pushing clients to do cardio or encouraging clients to do cardio that they enjoy doing. So running is a huge thing at the moment. You can run a couple of times a week and maintain a lean physique. I think if you start pushing it more than that, there can be negative drawbacks. It's hard to recover from. It can sap your energy from your strength training. But you could do any form of cardio. You could do the Stairmaster, you could do the elliptical, you could do a spin bike, you could do a fitness class, you could do running, whatever it is. And pretty much everyone that we work with, unless they're ridiculously busy and they're doing some other form of sport, we will program cardio for them. So strength training plus cardio, and lastly steps. Technically steps aren't training, they would kind of fall under expenditure. But I think trying to hit that golden range of between 8 to 12k steps a day is gonna put you in a very good position to maintain a lean physique. I honestly think, similar to what I said about cardio, if you're doing less than 8k steps a day, you're gonna find it very hard to get lean and stay lean, because your output just isn't that high throughout the week. You're not going to burn as many calories, and you're going to need to be more aggressive on your nutrition. Another big reason why I am a fan of encouraging clients to do as much movement as they can do is because generally the clients that we work with are traveling, they're having meals out with their clients, they're going to restaurants with their families and things like that. So they need a little bit more flexibility with their nutrition. They need to be on a generally higher amount of calories. So again, if you can move more, you're going to burn more calories throughout the week. So strength training key, that's the absolute foundation to look good and keep your metabolism fast. Cardio as a supplement, and obviously to improve the health side of things as well and raise the expenditure, and then similar comment to the steps as well. And if you are finding that you feel like you're wasting your time doing steps, you think it's a waste of time, could be doing other things, try and do some work when you're doing steps, batch on another task. So for me, I'll respond to clients, I'll call my family, those sorts of things, so it doesn't feel like I'm just moving for the sake of it. Okay, so last part, nutrition. There's obviously so many other things that we could have talked about today, but I wanted to keep this video concise: mindset, training, and nutrition. So everyone these days has heard of a calorie deficit, but unfortunately that is essential to adhere to if you do want to lean down. Now, your macros and your deficit target is going to be dependent on your gender, your height, your age, and your activity level, which is related to the training and the movement that we mentioned before. So for me, as someone who, I'm doing less steps at the moment just because it's so hot in Dubai, around 8,000 a day, and then I am strength training 3 times a week and running around 3 times a week as well. I'm just under 80 kilos. I know that I can maintain my weight on 3,000 calories. My maintenance might actually be a little bit higher than that, but just for the sake of the example here, 3,000 calories. I currently consume around 75 grams of fat, around 400 to 423 grams of carbs, and around 180 to 200 grams of protein a day. If I wanted to lean down, I would put myself into a calorie deficit. And again, we are talking about just nutrition here. This is assuming that everything else remains the same and consistent. I would reduce my intake by 300 to 500 calories. If I reduce my intake by 500, I would lose weight a little and body fat a little bit quicker. 300 would be more of a moderate deficit. When you go from maintenance into a deficit, you want to only reduce fats and carbohydrates. You want protein to be the same, because this is going to help you recover, retain muscle mass, and keep you satiated too. So for me, Again, it depends how aggressive I want to be with the cut and how quickly I want to lean down, but I'd probably reduce my fats by 10 grams down to 65, and I'd reduce my carbohydrates all the way down to 300, 350, depending on the exact number there. So take yourself from maintenance to a deficit. You can calculate this online. Do not reduce protein because you run the risk of reducing muscle mass there. And then once you have achieved that look, you know, if you wanted to lose 15 pounds of body fat, that could take you anywhere between 10 and 20 weeks, depending on how quickly you want to progress. Once you've achieved that look, you would then start to bring your calories back up. So maybe increasing your intake by 200 and then eventually getting yourself back up to maintenance. And that's how you stay lean. There's obviously so much more that goes into it than that. And the biggest thing really is explaining food choices to clients, helping them navigate meals out and things like that, which we'll get onto in a second. But that is the basic theory and principles behind it. But I find usually with clients with nutrition, it's more about mindset again, like helping them choose the right things, helping them understand when to eat certain things and maybe pull back a little bit. But meals out and social events usually get in the way of nutrition a lot. You know, it's not hard to stick to a meal plan. It's not hard to prep your food and eat the same things every day if you don't have anything going on. But when you're traveling, when people are inviting you out to meals and things like that, meals out and events are usually the things that disrupt the nutrition. So what you would want to do if you were eating out is use a technique that I've mentioned in other videos before called banking calories. So we just put it here, banking calories. So let's say you were sticking to, you know, hypothetically, let's say 2,700 calories a day, and you knew that you had a meal out tomorrow, which you were going to need to go up to 3,000 calories, so 300 higher than your deficit of 2,700, so 3,000. Remember, it all comes down to your total weekly average intake. So let's say you could just pull back on one day, the day before, to 2,400, save yourself 300, and then you could afford to go up by 300 there to 3,000. It just depends. Like if clients want to have a much higher calorie day, wouldn't always recommend doing that, and I'll explain why in a second. You could pull down 2 days before. So you could pull down to 2,400 for 2 days, which would allow you to go up to 3,600, or you could have 2 days of 3,000. That's a technique that we will use with clients that are a little bit more social on the weekend, is they'll go a little bit tighter on nutrition throughout the week and then a little bit higher on the weekend. And to be honest, that's what I like to do as well, because I like to have a couple of meals out on the weekend. But the reason that you don't want to pull back too aggressively and have these really high calorie days is because you just essentially get yourself into a bit of a binge and restrict cycle where you go really low, really high, digestion is off, motivation is off, all those sorts of things. So again, nutrition, calorie deficit is absolutely key, but navigating meals out and things like that is going to be the biggest determining factor as to you getting lean and staying lean. And again, going back to the identity and the mindset side of things I mentioned at the start of the video, when you're making these decisions with nutrition, you know, does the person who is lean like me overeat when they eat out? No, I eat more than I do when I meal prep at home, but I don't overeat. I don't usually have desserts every time I eat out. I'll have sometimes a starter and then a lean protein source for the main, like a steak, some vegetables and maybe some fries or something like that. So mindset around nutrition is super important, and mindset around training as well, like not skipping sessions, putting in the work to do the steps and things like that. So 3 components: mindset, training and nutrition. Hope you found the video somewhat useful. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to do so.